I am Julieta Aranda. I am the organizer of the talks program this year in Art Basel. It's the first time I do it, so thank you for your patience as I get used to doing this. And today I'm also moderating the talk between production and reproduction, career and motherhood in the art world. It's a topic that is very, very dear to me, since I am a mother, as are the panelists. In a nutshell, the talk is, we are questioning if the art world is compatible with parenting. According to 19th century stereotypes, artists are obsessive, solitary, selfish characters. 2 centuries later, has this perception changed? With socially oriented work, relational aesthetics, and care economies embedded into artistic practices, has the art world finally made room for female artists and curators to be mothers, or is motherhood still considered the kiss of death for a career? The participants on this panel, all of them mothers, will discuss their experiences and how they juggle their career and private lives. And the panelists are, starting from my left, is Chus Martínez, who is the curator and head of the Art Institute in Basel. Born in Spain, Chus Martínez has a background in philosophy and art history. Currently, she is the head of the Institute of Art of the FHNW Academy of Arts and Design in Basel, Switzerland. Before, she was the chief curator at the Museo del Barrio, New York, and Documenta 13, head of department and member of Core Asian Group. Previously, she was chief curator at MACBA in Barcelona, the director of the Frankfurter Kunstverein, and the artistic director of Sala Recalde in Bilbao. And for the 51st Venice Biennial, Martínez curated the National Pavilion of Cyprus, and so many other things. Okay. We also have Coco Fusco, who is an interdisciplinary artist and writer and the Andrew Banks Endowed Professor of Art at the University of Florida. She is a recipient of a 2018 Rafkin Prize for Art Criticism, a 2016 Greenfield Prize, a 2014 Sintas Fellowship, a 2013 Guggenheim Fellowship, a 2013 Absolute Writing Award, and again, many, many more things, and many fantastic performances as well. And lastly, we have Nadine Zeidler, who is the co-founder of Kraupa-Tuskany Zeidler Gallery in Berlin. The gallery was established in 2011 together with her partner, Amadeo Kraupa-Tuskany. I will not go through the entire bio. So, maybe the best way to start is to just go through the three of you and try to get a sense of why are you doing this panel and what is your position towards motherhood in the art world?
Well, I think, first of all, the sense of surprise to yourself. I think probably if I would have been invited by being 25, participating in a panel talking about motherhood, me myself would react like many other people saying, oh, what, like I don't want to be framed that way. And then when you actually face certain realities and you want children and you have them and you want these children being absolutely compatible with your work, then you become aware that these kind of discussions, they are not only lateral to the art world, they are not circumstantial to the conditions of the work, but really crucial to discuss the structures and how the structures possibilitate or not equality, and equality like going beyond equality. As Ige Garay would say, women that are aiming towards equality, they are not ambitious enough. So we need to be even more ambitious than that, and this is a very important issue, the right to have children and how your conditions are going to accept this reality and accommodate it, and on the other hand, even if you don't have children, how this compatibility and coexistence work. And I've been very surprised by the fact that it's something, now that I'm in an art school, that of course is the unspoken. People are like colorblind, like we are educated in not naming it. So you don't name it till it's your problem. When it's your problem, you also frame it as an individual problem, and it's never the problem of an organization. And then if it's the problem of the organization, you try to see it as you have enough rights, like you have some time, you have some money, that you're, if you are lucky to be hired, if you are a freelance, then it's a completely different thing. These kind of premises that are there, so that should be enough, but definitely is not enough at all. And then it interferes with questions of, if I'm a young artist and I want to really do something meaningful after my studies, when should I have children, or should I totally erase that from my curricula, or not now? Can I apply for a residency program and then tell them that I'm pregnant, or should I get pregnant? Can I get pregnant? Do you think that if I am pregnant and appear in a committee, people would give me a scholarship? And it so really absolutely takes you aback to see how these very simple, logistical questions affect decision-making, but are also embedding values that are in our society. And yes, if you are pregnant, it could be that when you are presenting, people don't give you the scholarship because they think that the next years you are going to be thinking about something else, which is not necessarily your work, and therefore your brain would be kind of annihilated by it. And there's thousands of examples of that. And I think that's why I accept being here with you.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I could spend hours and hours and days with personal anecdotes of the way in which I have been ejected from events when I had a small child and, denied jobs. But I think that the most important thing is to think about, this is a sector that prides itself on being filled with educated, liberal, enlightened people, but that we're actually, as a labor sector, quite hypocritical in that it's entirely unregulated and people speak one way and act in another way, and they basically naturalize a structure that is totally disadvantageous to women who parent, because there are no specific rights or protections for maternity or for parenting. So there's no guarantee of maternity leave. There's no guarantee that you won't be ejected from a job based on. There's no attention to the different schedules of children and of the art world. Like everything in the art world happens between 5 and 9 o'clock, which is prime parenting time. There's no, of course, we pride ourselves in discursively on being able to multitask, but a mother who comes to give a lecture with a baby and changes the baby's diapers while talking, which I have done, is basically thought of as someone who shouldn't be there, right, and asked to leave. So, you see, you live it, but I see it as a structural problem that the way in the hypocritical attitude is basically a form of discursive naturalization of structural inequality that we refuse to recognize. But this is an unregulated sector that offers very little rights to anybody who works, but particularly to those who mother. And then there's, of course, the hypocrisy and duplicity of loving to see visual representations of parenting and maternity and children, but not wanting to actually have children in our midst, right, or negotiate their presence or the complexities of dealing with them. We prefer drunk artists to children when it comes to social spaces of the art world, even though I think drunk artists are much more difficult to deal with than a screaming child. So, what's going to change this? I think we tend to believe that because we are a sector full of educated people that all we have to do is just be nicer. But I have, at this point, with a teenager living with this issue now for 14 years, I don't believe that being nicer will do anything. That I actually think that lawsuits do a lot more than being nice. And so it takes egregious violations that then provoke legal action that actually force the sector to change itself.
Thank you, Coco. Nadine, your turn.
Yes, so for me, I run the gallery with my partner, and when I started to work in the art world, I never really had this vision of like, I wanted to have a child or something, but this came rather out of our relationship. And I agree, I think if I wouldn't run the gallery with my partner, I think it would be pretty hard to continue being a gallerist. I think that's very clear. I also feel, but then at the same time, I was also thinking a little bit, okay, I still, don't want to be seen as, oh, she is the gallerist who has children, you know. I don't want to be contextualized in such a way, you know. I want to be a gallerist and I want to do my job and I want to be there for my artists. And I don't feel like that I can make the excuse, oh, I could not introduce your work to this and this collection because I have a baby or because I'm a mother and, you know, I was on maternal leave. So I also feel the responsibility that if I decide to have children, then I also need to take care that my business is structured in such a way that I can still provide the same service to the artist I'm working with. So do you understand a little bit what I want to say? And on the other hand, I also see that, you know, we are all somehow self-employed, and I think this gives us amazing freedom also in the way how we, you know, interact with our children. So we can for example, take half the day off and just spend the time with our children, or, you know, we can just be 2 or 3 months and have intensive family time, but then there are other moments. I mean, I'm just only talking about me as from the perspective of a gallerist. But then there are also these moments like art fairs that makes it extremely difficult for us. So if we wouldn't have my parents now looking after my kids, then, you know, what would we do? Or if you don't have a structure of nannies or
Money.
Exactly, it's about money.
It's all about money. I mean, I adopted an infant as a single mother. Every single minute of my life since the moment that he became my child, I have had to pay another human being to care for him so that I can work. Yeah. So when he was a baby, I could only afford 40 hours a week, and that was the time that I needed to get everything done. And after 5 o'clock, I couldn't work anymore. And then what do? I can't how many openings can you show up to before they start yelling at you about a screaming kid, right? And also, how many nights can you keep the kid up when they get older, because you have to be out until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So you have to stop doing it for a while unless you can afford to pay more money. Right?
I mean, I think we can start addressing like the specifics. One of them, obviously, is like the economics of it. Women we have been bearing the load of unpaid labor and social reproduction. Silvia Federici writing style is like, of course, there is like this hidden labor, which is that without women getting pregnant and having children, society would come to a standstill pretty fast. So there is the work of social reproduction that is, of course, unpaid labor. And the economics of, when you want to do your unpaid labor and your paid labor as well, it means that fraction of your earnings, which can be a lot of your earnings, are going towards creating the conditions for you to work, basically. So, and I think here we all can have anecdotes where, in my case, I have been asked to go give a talk about feminism and motherhood, but the people that invited me refused to pay the flight of my child and his nanny, or to provide me with a nanny. So the option was to spend my entire fee on flights and childcare and come to a zero sum to actually discuss a topic that I am like really desperately wanting to see change. So I wonder how many people simply have to drop out of the art world, not because their brains changed and they don't care, but because simply they can't afford it.
Well, when I announced to friends of mine my intention, women artists, they said, you won't be able to work for 3 years. That's what my older women friends who had children said, because those are the years where the child really needs 24/7 attention, and there's no free childcare in the States at that age, right?
But I think I would like to say 2 things. One is that we can change things, and how important it is to get technical. Like I work in an institution. I had the luck, if you want, to have been always working in institutions, and institutions are not at all ready for any of those conditions. So, and we need to go to some kind of radical discussions. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, if you would discuss your salary, you should discuss also the extra cost that you would have as a woman. This would be or could be part of the discussion. When you try to do so, everyone says like, but this is you and your partner. That's a private thing. Why are you bringing it here? Then you would say, well, perhaps I don't have have a partner, perhaps my partner is in a different economical position or whatever, but I really want to discuss it here. And then they say, no, please, this is private. Don't bring this subject. You know what, I'm bringing it here. Well, let me ask, like, how much do I need to invest in a country like Switzerland, for example, where there is very few full-day schools? If I want to really work till 6 o'clock, what does it mean? Who is picking him up? Who is bringing, like, what would it mean for my husband? What would it mean for the structure? What would it mean economically? And then you put all the numbers on that, and they really don't like it. But it's important to put these numbers on the table, to at least make them
in the States that it's illegal for them to do that.
It's illegal?
In a job search, you're not allowed in the United States to present any questions or issues relating to family to the job candidate, right? That's the basis on which this lawsuit was able to go forward with the woman from, excuse me?
Nikki Colombo, you mean?
Yeah. And so you as a candidate, you can talk about it, but it's very, it's seen almost like like blackmail, since the employer cannot bring any of their issues to the table.
No,
so there's a legal problem.
It's different, and the problem in many European countries is that there is no flexibility of salary negotiation. Mm-hmm. So I'm not implying here that this conversation has as a goal even to earn more money. What the goal of this conversation, in my opinion, would be even to make it transparent. Mm-hmm. The kind of economical concerns, constraints that you would have facing that would affect the salary, like how the salary looks like. You normally, when you have an interview, they talk about the rent, how the rent would have an impact. You would talk about life quality. So, parenthood also has an impact for men and for women, not only talking about the point of view of women. Then, how you can change, for example, what you were saying. I think positive news is that in institutions where normally there is women, it's not a scandal, or now it's even becoming a regular question, what do I do? Could you provide a babysitter? And actually, if you have a team meeting about that, everyone in my team is more than happy to address the conditions of having speakers, guest people that would have special conditions and they need it. It's not at all a scandal anymore. And the fee goes accordingly to that because it's natural. And then we say, but that's the private decision. They cannot impose on us their economy if they make that decision. And there is so many women that didn't and men that, so, but still, I think that if we want to make it possible, we need to go into a certain positive inequality. We need to help that in a proactive way. And I think it's language helps, creating these conditions, creating protocols so that if I leave the institution or others, there is a record of this practice being made. And that's super difficult. You cannot imagine, I've been working in a museum in Magba, and of the 128 workers, 80 were women. And these issues were never on the table. So just to introduce them, it means that you're introducing them for the majority of the workers. But even with trade unions and so on, those questions were not at all on the table because people are ashamed of being considered abusive. So women apply the self-censor filter. I don't want that anybody think that I'm abusing the institution just because I have this.
But that, I mean, that's a very sort of self-deprecating way of describing a situation that I think is a different one. It's that anybody who does bring it up does face the very strong possibility of being punished, if not directly, indirectly, either by being denied employment or by being sanctioned for things that you're not responsible for. So, of course, you're not going to bring it up because you run the very real risk of completely undermining your ability to work altogether. I actually think, given the legal situation in the United States, but also the positive model of some Scandinavian countries where it's all taken care of already, that I would start with the law. If you live in a society in which, by law, you're covered for parental leave, for maternity leave, for child care, for everything, and where parenting is understood to be a norm that should be supported by the public coffers, right? Then these issues are they don't even arise. And so you don't have to have a confrontation every single time you have a meeting of all of the employees of an institution or struggle as an individual against the personal prejudices of people. I'm sure there are people in Sweden who are prejudiced against women who parent, but they don't have the law on their side. and they will be sanctioned for acting on their prejudice. And I would rather just have that. As I think anything short of that, then you rely on the morality or the ethics of individuals, and that's not a dependable structure.
I would both. I think that you are right, totally. It would be great to have the laws, but also, in honor of the truth, I must say that creating an environment where these questions are addressed and so on also challenges and changes the attitudes and behavior not only of women but of men. And I'm very happy to say that all the students that at the Institute, they have children while they are studying. I only observe the immense support also of the male community, and then to be facing this education or a new practice, if you want, is also equally important. So it's two tracks. It's not only the enforcement, which absolutely, because if you don't feel it, how would you do it? So it's better that you do it even if you don't feel it. I'm not asking for your feelings. But if you develop them later on, it's also great.
I mean, I also want to talk about something that Coco brought up, which is the issue of normalization of certain behaviors. Without going into specifics, I have witnessed at an institutional level the thought process where if a man becomes a father, his salary must go up because he is the head of a family and he needs to support now 3 mouths. Automatically, it's not one, but 2 people are added to his wallet. And same organization, when a woman has a child, her salary must be reduced because now she does not have time to concentrate in the important things. It's incredible, but and this is coming from people that are entirely, that have normalized these things, but otherwise are progressive, liberal, incredibly educated people. So how this kind of cognitive dissonance takes root into our field?
Not only. When I was, for example, working at MAGBA, to be very transparent, after a year, the head of human resources came to me and said, did you notice that because of you, everyone is getting pregnant? I was like, hombre, I don't think it has been me, but implying that my liberal sense of producing this situation encourages people to do something that costs a fortune. And then he said, it cost us a fortune. Lie. It did not cost any fortune because there is insurance paying for that. And it's, the museum does not spend more money on that. It's like, what is the fortune that you are talking about? Well, you cannot build a team if every 6-7 months somebody is in a maternity leave producing some sort of a hole in the system. You cannot build a team and then you need to replace them all the time with other people that actually are much less paid because they are not in the same kind of hire. So he could only, and isn't it the goal to produce exactly that? I thought in every organization that I am, people get the courage to get children. Isn't it great news? I think they can do wherever they want, meaning if this decision, if we create the freedom to make people make the right decisions for their life and work, then we are in the right organization. But it's very interesting how they really look at the numbers, and you are right on that. This comment should be illegal.
I mean, it's also, this I guess also has something to do with the fact that women are seen as a minority. I mean, we are, we enter the category of minority. Somehow, I don't understand because in the numbers that does not add up to being less. I mean, it's kind of 51-49. With the 1% more being women in the world, but it's it's the framing and the kind of body of law that has been built that is not favorable. Because I guess, since we are still talking about economics, it means that all of a sudden there have to be financial responsibilities to things that have been furthering society unpaid ever since. So that makes people uncomfortable.
But part of that is, even maternity or parenting aside, the history of employment in arts professions is of people who are presumed to already be wealthy, particularly the women involved were presumed to have income from wealthy husbands or from inheritance. And so the salaries are low. They're still low. To go be an assistant curator in a museum in New York, you have to have someone paying your apartment because you couldn't possibly live on it. I mean, I, have had temporary curatorial positions at museums in New York and seen all these curatorial assistants walking in, Gucci and Prada and thinking, you're not, you make $25,000 a year, like you spend all of it on your clothes, clearly, on what you have on today, right? So somebody else is paying for you to live. And that's, and so that is, has been kind of the history of women in the art world, was the assumption was their salary was never really for them to live on anyway, right? So then you add to that then that, to have more benefits, like a maternity leave and all of that, then it's from within the institution, it's viewed as crippling the institution because suddenly they have to become really responsible for the people who work for them. But you see what is going on now is museum employees, at least in the States, starting to become activists around the issue of unionization. This just happened with the new museum, and I read yesterday or the day before that now it's happening with the Guggenheim. I know this was a struggle at MoMA for a long time, and it was a brutal struggle, and that the staff lost that battle. This was many years ago in the beginning of the aughts, but now they're starting to win. And I think that it's a response to an economic crisis, millennials not having enough income to survive and realizing that they're going to have to organize and do something to be able to change that situation. And, we can perhaps hope that if there is unionization across the board, that part of the union bargaining, collective bargaining, can be around issues like maternity and paternity leave.
One of the problems is that the issue of paternity and maternity is not your problem until it becomes your problem. So often when you don't have a child, you don't think that, what the changes are, what the expenses are, how the conditions change, and it becomes, as Chus was saying, a private issue that you solve privately. So you become, when you solve it and you are able to work within that, you become an exception and you are addressed as an exception. There is so how to turn our exceptional cases into across-the-board conditions. That's something that is important.
Collective bargaining is much more effective. If you talk about unionization, it allows for collective bargaining. But if you go for it at a national level, why would I vote for Elizabeth Warren in the next presidential election? Because she has a child care plan. She's the only candidate who has a child care, a complete, thorough child care plan, from parenting leave to free nursery and pre-K to zero tuition for public universities, all the way through a child care plan and a health care plan, which is essentially what Americans don't have and what makes parenting so brutally expensive.
Well, but Europe has also, it's fantastic black spots. I think in many countries, like in Germany and also in Switzerland, the debate is really not on the table. How schools work imply that you are not working 100%.
Yeah.
So they are implying that, and since people can work in percentages, the one reducing the percentage of work to take care is you. And also, if you would be, and that implies many things, because it goes back to the idea that better to save money, or that you provide this money to the family and buy another house and go into inheritance and property and real estate and don't damage your family capital by that, than working like full-time and then needing to give all this money to another person just to take care of your child, and so on and so forth. In Spain, the problem is reverse. The parenting laws are much more open. Men can take 4 months, a woman can take till 6 months, 4 pay, 2 unpaid. But there is a big problem: no flexibility in the hours work. So a normal hour in a normal museum in Spain is still 8 o'clock. So somebody should explain me how this works. But this is what people does. They do everything. So they call their parents. Everyone is kind of, pivoting around that. But there is absolutely no possibility of working differently, not less, just differently. And that goes to the observation of all the structures. When I came to Switzerland, and still I'm fighting for it, the meetings are of the directors board is once a month, and they are at 8:35. 8:45, so 8:45. And I thought, this is impossible. If I go to the school to leave my child, I'm going to be late all the time. And by the time I open the door of the meeting room, they are seeing my Spanishness. You would think that all the time I've been just, dreaming flamenco in my bed, and I came late because of it. And then you are not seeing from where I come from. So I propose that the meeting should be at 3:30 on Fridays afternoon, when your wife is packing to go to the mountains, and then you just, meet in the cloakroom, because I cannot go anywhere. I just need to wait till 6. So, and they were kind of white. So every single choreography of the organization should be observed, should be revealed, should be talked about, and see for whom is that convenient or not. And then ask yourself, because you can also not imply that people would think it by themselves. If they have been alone, there is like right now 3 women at the director level at my university. So it's clear that the majority of these men don't have the problem. So I can also not accuse them or not think for me. I need to think, put it on the table, and then they may reject it or not. So these kind of changes, I think, are very important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, but as somebody who's worked for 25 years in universities where there's a hierarchy, if you are a junior professor, which is more likely that if you are parenting young children, you will be a junior professor, and you open your mouth with things like that, you will not get tenure ever. You will not keep your job ever. You will not be employed by anybody else because the gossip about you will travel. So people are forced into silence.
But Coco, we can change that. I think, of course, meaning, yes, you are totally right to a certain point, but you can also address it as a person in charge of an institution. You see that in front of you. So it's not even the worker that needs to bring it. I think you can see the level of panic that certain young women have when they tell you, oh, I'm pregnant again. It's like, so what? Fantastic. I'm very happy for you. You can be pregnant 8 times if the body allows. So, it's really something that is not going to affect you badly. I'm assuring you that, and creating this condition. So we can produce a difference as well. Meaning,
if you get to a position like you where you are in charge of it, yes. But when it's the larger, when you're subject to because it's our generation, we have come into this professional life with the expectation of being able to have it all, right? And women just a little bit older than me, right? So I'm like 59, are of the generation who entered the workforce in large numbers in high power professions, probably for the first time, and their expectation was that they could not have children at all. And so sometimes my conflicts have not been with men, but with those women who are angry that I chose, even though I waited until I was 45, to parent and work and not give up anything about work. I didn't stop working for 3 years because I would have starved. So during that time, I had to take my kid when I wasn't supposed to be able to work, just drag him around with me, just as if I were selling fruit in a market in Guatemala, right? And put him in a box next to me, and I had him in a stroller next to me. And that's what I did for 3 years.
Let's talk about perception a little bit, because this becomes interesting. I live in Berlin, and I was perplexed when I saw the statistics, and the number of women that go back to full-time employment, even with all the benefits that are in the system, is I think women that have that return to full-time employment is around 16%, and when they have 2 children, full-time employment drops to below 10%. And that is mind-blowing. And this is because in something that I have faced in Germany is a concept that may exist in Switzerland as well, that is Rabenmutter. Nadine, you probably know about that one.
Yeah.
Which is that you are an irresponsible mother, because if you are caring about yourself, you are not caring about your child. And I mean, a mother friend of mine was angrily addressed by a shopkeeper that saw that her partner was taking the child around, and when she went to the shop with her child, the shopkeeper was telling her, "You are a Rabenmutter. You abandoned your nest." And I mean, it's
but I really think that we have to, become much more self-confident about this. If someone on the street tells you something like this, I think, they just didn't understand. And I totally agree. I think it's up to us now, if we're in a position of power, to create these conditions where young artists, young women, where we can have children. And I think, for example, for us, it would never make a difference. We would never drop an artist only because she decides to have a baby. In the contrary, we would sit together and see, if they have a show coming up and it might be difficult for them to travel there, if maybe an assistant. So I think this is really how we can change it. But I also totally understand that if you're in a very large structure and you're not in a position of power of reshaping it, that it is a very frustrating experience. But I think in Germany also, because I also have other friends and they're all self-employed, and I think there are already some nice structures, this thing of Elterngeld that we have in Germany, so you can stay at home, either the father or the mother, for 14 months, or now you also have the time to split it up, and you can always work part-time, and then you can extend it to 2 or 3 years, and you get always support by the state. You can have childcare starting from 1 year on. But I also see, like, when you are in kind of in a job where you have, like, if you want to go back full-time, that it can also be exhausting if you don't have any help. But I think the situation is already a little bit improving, and I also feel that we need to, help, be there and be open to people to talk about it. And, if someone calls you a Rabenmutter, you just say, listen, I don't, you live in another time, and I want to go move forward and, make this possible. And I see so many, pregnant artists, curators walking around, and I think there is something changing at the moment.
Yes, it is, and I agree with you, but probably not in Germany. And actually, I would demand a much more structural debate on that. So it's not about me insulting the guy back, which happened. I think the CEO of Documenta, when I was joining the Documenta team, my son was 8 months, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" As a joke. And then, but what do I do? Answer back for what reason? I don't need to answer back anybody, but I would like a society that answers back. I would like some sort of a collective that makes this kind of perception impossible or monstrous or rare or strange, so that it resonates. And this is really strange. It's happening in Spain because, of course, because of dictatorship. The generation of my mother was the first generation incorporated to work in full time, and for those people, it's a question of democracy that women work full time, no matter if they cost them the full-time salary. Working is a statement of presence in the society. So you cannot, it's not a question of capital, it's a question of your body inserted in the social body. In Germany, it's not like that. Your body should not be there. So this is something that has to do with the media, it has to do with the ways that we address it, but not, I would always say, it's not my personal problem, and it is. It's a problem that also affects men. I would like them to, they are fathers, they are people that support, they many times feel in a similar way. They should also speak up for that. It's not only my problem as a mother, it's our problem.
I mean, just to keep going on the issue of perception, let's imagine, and I mean, like, there are, without naming names, there are many cases like this. Let's imagine female artist with 7 children by 7 different fathers operating in the art world. Like, how, yeah, it would be beautiful, but would it be possible? I mean, like, logistically possible with the conditions that we have now. I'm thinking about things that Marina Abramovic has said, right? That if you want to be a great artist, you cannot have children. It's that Tracy Emin has said, kiss of death, you don't, I mean, you simply don't go there. And I mean, like, why do we perpetuate this stereotype, or how can we take it down at the level of the symbolic thing? Yeah, like.
Well, I mean, part of it is because you face the obstacles of the lack of protections, the prejudice of individuals, the problems with institutions. You know, you face all of those things, right? People sort of frowning on you for making the decision as if it means less of a compromise with work. And then there are more personal, psychological, emotional dimension of it. I mean, I just feel like I have one child, and I don't have in my own psychological economy more time or energy for more. Like, they're like, do you want a partner? I'm like, no. I don't want any more. I don't want to have to give any more to anybody else. I have enough for one child, and that's all, if I do want to make work. I mean, and that's just a reality of my life. I just feel like I won't have enough space in my brain or in my heart or in my actual daily life to do any more, right? So, and some of it is because of the lack of protections, but some of it is also that, you have to understand yourself and how much you can do and give.
But I think, for example, I have at least 2 students with 2 children studying, and if not more. And first of all, that's totally possible, but they also create a structure of trust, and also with their partners and friends, that this is also producing a different atmosphere of support that has been really, really positive. So if the 7 different fathers would actually attend their 7 different openings while she's installing the show, giving the signal that you can do whatever, and then I am also inscribing my fatherhood into the Artworld and not the mother. I think in case of having a partner, in case of this partner being a male, just also counterbalancing the perception by presence is always something that has an effect or may have an effect, to be a little bit positive. But yeah, it's a tough question, and I think that younger people sometimes are much more imaginative with the ways that they organize themselves and ask for help. And one big question for me is also, how are we asking for help? Are we asking for help when there is absolutely, it's too late? Are we, organized enough also in telling what we need? Do they know enough, of what is needed so that it can be done? And I think from there, the 7 fathers would be very welcome and probably super nice people. If they provide monthly. And they help.
But that's also assuming that those 7 fathers only have that one child to attend to. And my observation is that those 7 fathers probably also have 7 children themselves. And so then it gets more and more complicated.
And I also feel like, because I also have friends, and some of my friends, they decided to stay at home for 2 or 3 years. And I think this should also be an option. I totally understand your argument that you say, if you want to go back. No, I think you have to. You said something like inserting your body into work.
Super conservative me says no to that. When I was working in Germany, my chief curator, I was at the Kunstverein. I have a chief curator. She said, "I'm pregnant." I said, "You shut up." And then the board meeting, they said, "We think she's pregnant. She's not. I don't know." And then they say, "Oh, we need to ask her if she wants to leave, and she has the right to leave for 3 years." And she said, "Yes," and I say, "No." And then after 4 months, 5 months, she goes back. But what it means is that when you take that right, it normally, 90%, it turns into a possibility of not having you back. Yeah. And I don't want that. So I really don't think it's a good option in this moment of history. If you are rich, if you are bourgeois, you can do it.
I want to make this point for women, because we talked about this, and it also has to be accepted as labor. Like women taking care
totally.
of children. I think this is just another form of labor, and I think they should be the free right to come back.
I'm super polemic there, because I want you as a soldier. I actually respect your choices and so on, but as a general of the army, I need the bodies into the ground floor, and I need them with the children around, because if they keep invisible at home, they don't serve my cause. So I do it for pretty egoistic reasons. If I wanted to change, I need your body and your children with me.
When my son, who is over there, was born, I actually I organized myself so I would have a solo show open within 2 months of having given birth. But it was grueling, and a part of me would really have preferred not to travel to New York with a 2-month-old to open a solo show installing while breastfeeding, but it feels incredibly important to be able to provide that image. And to provide that point of identification, and that yes, it's possible, it happens, and yes, I don't sleep at all, and I have not changed in a few days, but we can get to the place where this becomes possible. So that's, in a different world, I would love to have stayed home for a year, but the world as it is, I cannot afford to stay
And
home.
I also want to tell you something. It is proof scientifically that if you don't breastfeed, you don't get cancer. Don't be afraid. The other thing is that if you breastfeed or you don't, because it's your choice, and drink a gin and tonic, the alcohol does not go straight into the child. So I really want to point that out, because the ground is, because I heard it so many times that, that I would have breast cancer because of that, or that my child is automatically drunk because of my gin and tonic, that I want to tell you that he would need to spend the money later on in an extra one.
The other thing, this might be taken controversially, but a lot, I mean, obviously what you want to do as a parent is what you want to do, but a lot of the time the pressure, at least in the United States, on to telling women to stay home is this idea that childcare is not good for them. Okay, that childcare is bad for them, that childcare means they will be neglected. I knew when I started my adventure in motherhood that I was only going to have one, and I also knew that I had to use childcare right away, as soon as possible. I mean, at first it was just part-time, somebody helping me so I could work, and then as soon as he was 12 months old, then I put him into daycare. But I do believe in the model of using collective childcare as a way to help with the socialization of children, that my son was able to learn how to share and interact with other children from very early on, which is a very important emotional intelligence skill, and that if I had kept him away from other children, which is what happens when they stay home, that he would not have had that opportunity early on, and I think that it would have affected his makeup. He is a very social person, I think, as a result of having from very, very early on had to negotiate. He was in a room with 18 kids from the time he was 12 months old. And I think that was good for him. I don't think it was a form of neglect.
But it's, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's and this.
Yeah, but the ideology is the opposite of, oh, we're neglecting them, or they're not going to get as good, or they're going to be ignored, or they're going to not have what they need. And that's not been my experience.
This kind of I find those kinds of arguments as sugarcoating very problematic issues, because there have always been economies of solidarity, whether be it a family or or friends, or however you manage the collective grandmother. I mean, I grew up in Mexico, where economies of solidarity are very big to navigate childcare. But the thing, I mean, this makes me think of something that Margaret Thatcher said, where it's like, society, what society? The only thing we have is families and government.
Yeah.
And to say that the child is the responsibility of the family, and to put them in a collective environment is equivalent to neglecting them, is a way to dismantle social support and to dismantle solidarities. So, I mean, once you become a parent, solidarity becomes more important than ever. The idea is to make something that, instead of it becoming your problem only when it is your problem, to address the fact that it is all of our problem.
But the expenses, even in Switzerland, which is a great country in many other respects, the expenses of the kita, like the daycare, makes that many parents can really not afford it more than 1, 2, or 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. It's also a social debate of what are you providing, what does it mean, what's the quality of it, how it's perceived, what the families talk about it. Well, for example, in Spain, unfortunately, but fortunately, if you need to work at 8 months, many parents just use the system, which is mostly affordable, and then you need to be there till 5, which is, yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Like, what does it happen in this amount of hours? But if so many people are in the same need, you can also have this debate about the quality of those structures and what are the service that they provide to these families and so on and so forth. But I think that this is, again, something that needs to be discussed, because if the school, like, I don't know, there's a lunch break at 12, and then you need to return it at 1, and then it goes out at 4, and then you are working till 6, how is this possible unless they think that very few women can work 100%. So they are implying that in the social message. The political structures, the social structures, and so on are telling you that don't do it because it's not possible. But it could be also possible. I do believe that many men would like to go home, to really work 60% and be 40% with their families. I do believe that. I think that many people would actually be very happy if the whole society accommodate also the needs as fathers, that they would also possibilitate that kind of situation much, much, much more.
I mean, it's also like like to create at a symbolic level, the image where a man that becomes a father is not emasculated. Yeah, that it's not all of a sudden lost his testicles the moment that he's changing a diaper. And that is an image that we need to produce, that image is not fully there. That's part of the thing. I was just looking at the clock. It's maybe time to open the floor for questions, if there are questions.
Yeah, there are questions.
Are there microphones there?
There's one in the first row as well, so both.
Hello. I only want to add that many times the decision to reject a pregnant woman or one with maternal problems is taken by another woman.
But not only. I've been in many committees. At certain levels, there is not woman enough. I don't deny that it may happen if the woman would be at the director's level. But at director's level, there is so many of them that this, what you said, is also... For it to be true, it does not need, a woman acting badly is also possible. We are not saying that women are saints. We are saying a structure should possibilitate for women to be pregnant and having children. So women can make exactly the same number of wrong decisions as men. But I tell you, statistically speaking, in the committees I've been, I was mostly in the room, the only woman. And the conversations were, and till very, very recently, and now it's impossible to ask, it was always a question in the interview, do you have the intention of having children? And I always advise every woman to say, of course not. Because till you get pregnant, probably you don't have that intention. That intention is not clear to you.
Yeah, but this is something that Coco was mentioning, that the normalization of these ideas, of course, they don't become normalized only in one gender. They become normalized at a society level. So there are women that, of course, like Marina Abramovich, believe that having a child and having a career in the arts is completely incompatible. So if you had a child, you already made the wrong decision, so please leave the room.
But not only that, but there are women who are in positions of authority who have to make decisions on labor based on economics, right? And if the pressure from their boards, their trustees, or whatever is, you have to keep your budget at this level, and you're talking about hiring a number of women who are going to have children, and they start doing the math, then they will use the economic rationalization that it is disadvantageous in the same way that a man will make that decision, because if they make a different decision that is economically disfavorable to the institution will also get rid of them. That's why the only way to stop this is if you have laws that make it impossible to do that to anyone who decides to bring parenting to the table, male or female, because then you suffer as an institution or as an individual the repercussions legally of acting in an economically rationalist way that undermines maternity.
What's another question there?
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for having this panel, and I think it's really cool to see a lot of people at it, because it's one of those conversations that you just kind of don't have. So thank you, first of all. The second thing is what you just talked about, changing the perception of fatherhood or masculinity. And I was wondering if you could comment on the notion of changing the idea that parenting is exclusively a question of labor, and think about ways in which forms of intelligence can emerge out of that relationship. Specifically, someone asked me if having a child had made me more wise, and I answered no, it made me more intelligent, in the sense that I've been lucky to participate and take part in and sort of even work on things that embed within them the kinds of insights, and even almost like philosophical insights that emerge out of some kind of absurd conversation that you can have with a 2-year-old, or the fact that they install a chair when they need to talk to it. And so I'm not saying more intelligent than others, I would never say that, but more intelligent than before. And I was wondering how,
of course, parenting is an incredibly complex beast. There is labor, there is love. And there is also a possibility of overstepping what you thought were your boundaries. So the way I see my experience with motherhood is actually the one moment where it became possible for me to actually leave my politics. I've been having political positions on the abstract, and when it comes to bringing up another human being, and when it comes to being responsible for that and actually enacting political positions towards the future, then the future is sitting right there, and it's 3 years old. So I have to put my ass on the line, and it's really about not making statements, but living them and carrying them through. So it made me an immensely more politicized person.
So just super quick. Institutions could just recognize the fact that there's actually new insights and new knowledges that are being produced through people going and having this experience.
Yeah, but I think our institutions are incredibly still shaped by a model of labor that is radically changing, and of course they are not shaped or tailored to these kind of new languages. You are implying also, a flow of ideas and arguments and ways of talking that would soften, that would actually include different knowledge, I don't know if this is the word, but different experiences into the richness that you can, provide into your community and all that. But I am very surprised. I'm not very surprised. It's not the word. But there is also many men talking about it. Many. I think I was surrounded by them when I was a child. My father was one, but many students of mine do mentoring, and they come and they want to talk that they just have a child, or they have a child since 1 or 2 years and so on, and they talk about it. And they talk about it not as a personal individual experience to share the work or to share the concerns, but to share how great it is, how they actually would also be very welcoming if people would address having the child and talking about children in the same kind of very restrictive, very negative way. And I think that this is something that we can all contribute to, women and men, and women specifically, because we are all the time implying that your life is going to be hell if. And of course, it's lots of work, but it's not necessarily that. And it's not necessarily that hell. So it goes with your thing. The conversation should totally radically change.
I mean, we don't choose to have children because we are masochists. There is something fantastic about it. And the thing is, of course, we are talking about motherhood, but the space should be open, and that's what I was talking about, representation on the symbolic level, for men to enter the conversation. For us, for women, we need laws and we need protection. For men, we need the space to actually be part of the conversation without all of a sudden feminizing themselves.
I agree. The only thing is that I get sick of the celebration of any man who decides to change one diaper versus me who, changed 7,000 diapers. I'm not impressed when a man decides to do something that he should have done. And I'm not going to celebrate him and pat him on the back 500 times for doing what we do all the time.
No, but we should normalize it.
But there's a kind of expectation, and the print media, the social media also does this. It kind of turns the fact of one guy or 5 guys deciding that they want to have a feature story on themselves because they stayed home one day with their kids into this big news item and punishes all the women for doing the same. So, it's fine. You want to be part of the equation, great, but just understand that, the milieu is, it's where you have to take it as a norm and not as a celebration, and also recognize that one active engagement is against the backdrop of massive disengagement, right? And complete sanctioning of disengagement, because there's not only the guys who live at home and don't do shit, but there's also the ones who don't even participate from the get-go because they refuse to be part of the equation, right? Or the ones who abandon, and that's really the majority.
Maybe it can also just be about both, It can be about the family. it doesn't need to be either the woman or the man or the father staying at home, but it can just also be about the family.
No, I don't want it to talk about family. No. That you don't get me, no.
Okay, I think, can we get
Yeah. Hello. I just want to say I'm the delegate for the Kunstverein here in Basel for Kunst und Kind, Mother and Child. And through my manifesto, through them, through the organization, we got that the government, the culture department of the government has acknowledged this situation and has given us a big amount of money to create the first studios with integrated childcare. And yeah, I'm an artist and an activist, and I'm from Argentina. And yeah, I just want to say that, you know, I'm just a somebody who had this problem and took care of it. Okay, so yeah.
Over here, yeah.
I speak as a non-parent. I just want to say you've talked a lot about institutions and employment, and it was a super fascinating talk, and I'm really, really glad I heard all these points, which, you know, is something I think about a lot anyway, but there was a lot of detail. I was very happy to witness. Anyway, I think another side of the coin is, and I don't think we've talked, or you've talked about this enough for me, is that, you know, as a freelance artist, all of these things employment doesn't even come near my situation. So the precarity of being a freelance artist with little or no gallery representation, possibly not even, you know, making objects, so possibly not even being able to enter into the market, kind of just makes parenthood that much more insane of a decision if you don't have support. So that just means either you're from a wealthy country with good, you're from Sweden, from a wealthy family, or you don't have children.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this
I would just say that I agree that precarity of freelancing makes the situation even more difficult, absolutely. But I wouldn't say that it means that there's no interface. Because, for example, I don't know how it is here, but in the United States, there's virtually no residencies that accept artists with children. Freelancers go to residencies all the time, and they're automatically denied access because it's okay to say you can't come with children. I didn't go for, you know, I've only gone to things where I've been able to either take my kid or get paid enough so that I can pay for the childcare. So that's, you know, 2% of the opportunities that are available, just to give one. But there are also, adjunct unions in the States in some schools that allow for certain forms of benefits that would then guarantee some money for maternity leave and all that. So it's not only that if you're a full-time worker, you would get all these things, and if you're a precarious part-time worker, you can't. It's about trying to empower, no matter what your interface is with a payment system or a benefit system, that you would have access to something, and that there are ways in which the art world excludes freelancers by not providing, you know, I mean, a fair like this, if you have Basel Art Kids, you can also have Basel Art Creche, right?
Yeah.
You could, and then that would entitle somebody as a freelancer to use it while they're attending the fair.
I mean, I think I understand that, you know, like it breaks my heart to hear that kind of thing, because I've heard it many, many times from people that do not have any kind of like steady income within the arts. And, you know, they would like to have a child, and they simply, they come to the realization that they can't afford it. And it's one of those things that is incredibly heartbreaking, and I would love to change that.
I think I just wanted to put the point out there that we also have to talk about paying artists,
Yes.
not institution by institution, but on a structural level.
Yes.
But in some countries that's done. That's what I'm saying, that is a national level. I think here there is a void. People, the residencies probably would not deny access if you come with children or your family, it means that this conversation is possible. So they don't have an opinion, so you can help to form an opinion. You can help to form an opinion also on the kind of support, because there is lots of support in Switzerland. What happens if, should we, in a positive initiative, be very attentive and observational about the needs of certain artists in certain ages, so that if they decide for parenthood, there is a structure and we can provide it. And I think this is a conversation that we can have, that it needs to be like just to get like a Kunstcredit for the fact that you are a performer and a mother for a certain amount of years, and this is some sort of, so in some countries it exists and in some countries it doesn't. The payment of artists is a Central European problem. It's not universal, and in some other countries it's regulated by law. A certain percent of the production of a show goes to the artist fee, and nothing goes unpaid, because this is illegal. So again, we are kind of, and need to be very active in realizing what are the kind of let's say, active role we may play in opening up this discussion without asking for something, you know, astronautical. It's just a normal discussion.
I also don't know how it is here in Switzerland, but in the States, if you have no income, you actually can have free health care and free child care. So I have artist friends who, because they have no income, have better, you know, they're not paying for any of that for their kids, whereas I had to pay for all of it, and half of what I made went into just being able to pay for childcare and health care to be able to work. So I mean, I don't know what the baseline is here. I also have friends in Germany who have done that they had no income, but they had childcare and health care for free. So that was what enabled them to have kids.
I don't know the details on that, even if I live here since 5 years. But still, I would think that if you don't have any income, nothing is very good coming your way. So I don't think that the system supports so that produce any sense of relaxation to the anxiety that this kind of expenses in a super expensive country like that would provide. So it would be very, you know, I don't think it's a good idea.
One more question.
Thank you all so much. I think we can say for sure we see the violence in the structure, and that we can also center intersectionality and see that different women are situated differently to these questions of power and inequality. But since we're in this space of contemporary art, ostensibly, I wanted to revisit something you were saying about this sort of idea of whose child is it? And looking at a possibility of, because I'm thinking creatively, artistically, reimagining almost these different possibilities of kinship patterns, whether they're traditional or new, and what space does that have? Because in addition to the legal protections, which are so entirely necessary, I wonder if we can use our sort of artistic capital to reimagine a space where there's not so much pressure on the individual parent or on the individual nuclear family, which is really just a product of capitalism and sort of artificial.
Well,
So
but there are still places in the world where it's intergenerational, multi-generational childcare, because people live, like in China, where you live with your parents and the grandparents, and they participate and there are places in Latin America where that's the case, and also among the poor in New York, there's a lot of intergenerational care. There's a lot of grandparents taking care of grandchildren because the parents are either incarcerated or addicted or whatever. The problem for middle-class women is that we statistically wait much longer to have children. I waited until I was 45. I know a lot of women who wait until their 40s. By the time I started, my mother was already in her, about to turn 80 and passed away when my kid was 5 years old. So, and like me, there are many others. We don't have, our parents are too old, or they're not even alive, or they're not in the same place. And so we can't depend on those kinds of structures that exist for people who start to parent much younger.
But in my case, I don't have a family, period. So, and not only that, but I live in Berlin, where, the circle of people that I knew from my previous life is just many, many kilometers away. So I had to rely on radical kinship, which is that I just, have to create a structure of trust and drop my child with friends and things. I mean, you have him for 2 days because I need to go to Norway. And so he becomes used to this kind of like, you know, a lot of my friends that ended up in precarious positions and at the moment yet unable to procreate, out of, you know, they do their experiments in parenting when I need someone to take care of my child for 3 days because I cannot take him with me. So for me, radical kinship is a necessity. And I think that we need to, on that note, we are going over time. So thank you so much for waking up early.